Yes.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the third virtual session of the City of Durham's 18th Annual Women's Forum, held in honor of Women's History Month. My name is Amy Blaylock, and I work in the Office of Public Affairs at the City of Durham. It is my pleasure to serve as your host for tonight's event. I have to say that what I'm most excited about is listening and learning as an attendee at this awesome program that our Neighborhood Improvement Services team has planned for all of us. As I just shared, this is the third session this month. Hopefully, you were able to attend the first two sessions, as there is one planned for every Tuesday in March, same time, same channel, but with different panelists to present other topics. If you missed the first two sessions, we hope you can participate in the rest planned for this month. Be sure to tell a friend and bring a friend. There is plenty of room at the virtual table with a feast of knowledge and inspiration being served. Pun intended. I believe we can all agree that this global pandemic has altered how we congregate to share and celebrate life. But we are a resilient people. Not only do we opt to move forward with this moment to acknowledge a few of the many great women in the Bull City, we transitioned to have a series of virtual sessions instead of just one marquee event. Tonight is session number 3, which focuses on mental health. This evening, we're highlighting the importance of resiliency during this pandemic, especially since so many of us feel isolated after a year of physical distancing and masking from loved ones, friends, and coworkers. Unfortunately, another alarming outcome of this global pandemic has been the rates of domestic violence that have been reported. Tonight's session is a conversation about this important issue. And while we can't chat in person, we ask that you stay engaged through your comments and questions. Just drop them in the chat box. And to make sure everyone can hear, we ask that you mute your microphone until the floor is open for your comments and questions. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to present Community Engagement Strategist Jenny Bell with our Neighborhood Improvement Services team, who is going to present tonight's purpose. Jenny, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. 5 days ago marked 1 year since the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus a global pandemic. As we enter year 2 of this pandemic in the middle of Women's History Month, we must reckon with the fact that women have been disproportionately impacted and have felt the negative impacts of coronavirus, and that this fallout of inequity will be felt for years to come. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated many of the problems women in the US already faced. Women who are experiencing poverty or who belong to marginalized communities are more likely to contract COVID and to die from it. Some women are being forced to quarantine in unsafe situations or dangerous households. Women also face greater risk of exposure to coronavirus because they are more likely to work jobs in service industries or healthcare. Moreover, women also often bear the brunt of caring for children and older relatives. And because of school closures, mothers of young children have had to reduce their work hours or leave their jobs entirely. Millions have been affected by COVID-19 since the first cases were reported last year. While evolving detailed information relating to the physical symptoms, spread, and preventative measures in the face of the pandemic have been increasingly available, less attention has been paid to the secondary effects of COVID-19. The socioeconomic impact of the virus has been devastated, leaving so many women in sustained isolation, some having lost their jobs, and feeling trapped with anxiety and fear, all while taking on increasingly active roles as caregivers. The mental health and stress women are experiencing due to COVID-19 is extraordinary. But despite these alarming numbers and the setbacks that women have suffered this year, we have real opportunities for positive change. Tonight, we will hear from professionals about the impact COVID-19 has had on women's mental health, what signs or symptoms you need to be aware of, and how to find the relief and help that you or others may need. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Thank you, Jenny. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker this evening. Denene Hinton is a community education specialist at Alliance Health. Denene has been a part of the Alliance Health team, formerly the Durham Center, since its inception in 2012. She brings more than 20 years of experience working with children and adults with mental health, substance use, and intellectual developmental disability disorders. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Psychology with a concentration in Sociology from North Carolina Central University. Her current responsibilities at Alliance Health include educating, consulting, and providing resources to public and private entities that routinely interact with individuals with special healthcare needs. Denene has extensive experience in case management, crisis intervention, and training. She is a youth mental health first aid instructor and a certified adult mental health first aider. Prior to working at Alliance, she served as a housing specialist, in which she assisted individuals who were homeless find and secure stable housing. Denene has a passion for helping individuals with special needs reach their full potential by promoting recovery and self-determination. Denene, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ms. Blaylock. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for having me tonight. Like just mentioned, I am the community education at Alliance Health, and I'd like to just come to you all tonight to share who we are and the resources that we provide that that hopefully can help someone who's struggling with the mental health and or substance use. So I'll get started just to give you a little information. Let me share my screen first. All righty. Okay. All right. So Alliance Health, we are a local management entity, also in an MCO, managed care organization, and we are the agency that governs mental health services, substance use, and intellectual developmental disability services in 4 counties. We serve Cumberland County, Durham County, Johnson, and Wake County. We service over 187,000 people who are Medicaid eligible. However, we do support individuals who do not have insurance or are underinsured. We receive what we call IPRS or state funding to support people without insurance. If you have private insurance, then we have kind of help you navigate that system. So what we do, we authorize, pay, and manage the Medicaid dollars. So if you know someone who is receiving, who is in need of some type of services, mental health services, and receiving Medicaid, we actually, it's kind of an insurance company. So we pre-authorize the services and pay for those services. And we contract with, in Durham, we contract with well over 200 providers in the community that actually provide the services. And we are a 24/7, 365-day access to information and behavioral health. And this is also the line in which people could call our office and get connected to the services. And that's 24/7. Okay. So right now, because of the pandemic, we have been given an opportunity to manage a grant. Money's given by the state for a program called Hope for NC. And some of you all may be aware of Hope for NC. And so what is Hope for NC? It's a tailored crisis counseling program for individuals who've been impacted by COVID-19. So it's 24/7 as well. So, you know, you might have seen signs out, you might have received flyers, you might have heard the commercials on the radio about this program. And it provides crisis counseling to anyone can call and say, you know, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time with my mental health, I have stress, anxiety, some depression. There's a clinician that can assist them in getting the help that they need. Also, if it's not mental health related and they just need resources as where to go get food, how to pay their bills, there's also folks who can help direct them in the right direction to get the help that they need. And this is not just there. This is available across North Carolina. All 100 counties have this program. Okay, this is our Hope for Healers. This is also a resource for people, for our health professionals, because we know that they on the front line have been dealing with a lot and have their struggles as well. So they're provided with the mental health and resilience support as well through Hope for NC. Okay. So this is also part of Hope for NC, and it's the scoop on managing your stress. And I'll go through a little bit more in detail about how to do that, when to recognize if someone is struggling. But this is just an easier way, this acronym, easier way to remember how to get through it. You know, S is to stay connected. We all know that we do well when we're connected to our friends and family as much as possible. Seek compassion, have compassion for yourself and others. Only try to control what you can, and reach out to help someone else. Observe how your use of substance. We know that the increase of substance use has increased greatly since COVID. So we want to be aware and recognize when they're self-medicating. Okay, it's okay to ask for help. Struggling is normal. I think I can honestly say that I believe every single person has been impacted by COVID some way or another. So it's okay to ask for help. P, be physical. Have a physical activity, which helps to improve your mood, right? Get out to exercise, take a walk. We have increased opportunities to participate in yoga, meditation, but getting some sunshine, you will find makes a world of difference. Okay. So what's the truth about mental health? We know that 42% of people with mental illness face stigma and discrimination at least once a month, and 58% say that the stigma and discrimination is damaging. And we know that 63% know someone with a mental health problem. Because so what statistics tells us is that 1 out of 5 people will, one out of 5 people will have mental illness or struggles of mental illness in their lifetime. So that's how common it is. And we also know that since COVID, mental health conditions have elevated. So 31% of the increase of depression has grown 31%, substance use 13%, and stress-related symptoms and disorders have increased 26%. So, and people who have considered suicide has increased 11%. So this is serious. Now, when we think about women, they're being impacted even more. We have, women who are struggling with not having jobs or income because they have to stay home to take care of their children. And, like I was not one of those moms who had young children at home, but having to become teachers when they never, ever thought they would be has been stressful. And it brings about a lot of anxiety for a lot of people, for a lot of women. But the lack of income and resources. And we know that when crisis hit, that a lot of times women are the ones who take the brunt of responsibilities in the home. Okay. So when you think of someone who might be suffering from a mental health disorder, we want to make sure people understand it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's not something that they have control over. It's not something that they ask for. It's not something you can just snap out of willpower. Just have, you hear people say, it's all about willpower. It's all about what you want to do. You can just snap out of it. And that's not the case. While there's no cure for a lot of mental illnesses, the recovery is possible. And I think I like to talk about, recovery and how important it is and that it is possible. People do get better. Yeah. So when you think about the stressors that women and men have had to go through, the number one stressor is anxiety. Just being afraid and anxious about going outside or like contracting COVID-19. It's real. People are struggling every day, just to make ends meet and just to have some sense of normalcy. So what do you do when that happens, right? You try to be uplifting, uplift yourself and others. Try to create a safe space for yourself in your home. You know, so some of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that you make contact with the ground, feet or floor, or tapping. I don't know, some people may be familiar with that, but just, you know, try and figure out a way to remain grounded. But when anxiety hits, drink a lot of, you know, drink hot or cold beverage, reach out for support and connect with others. We are available, not only Hope for NC, but Alliance Health. We are available to support people who may be struggling. And we have a 1-800 number as well that you can call and get immediate help and connection to services. Okay. Okay. You know, when you may have feelings of depression, and I'm sorry, this is. Sorry. It's so important to, because what I've found that, you know, people's, you know, sleep has been impacted. People aren't resting as well as they would like to. So it's really important to get your sleep, stay hydrated, move, eat well, stay connected, reach out for support. Find someone you trust, find a friend, a colleague. I know that a lot of people have weekly Zoom meetings with their family members or friends, just so they can stay connected. There are hotlines that you can call for support, including the National Suicide Prevention Line. And always remember, you're not alone. And we're all in this together. We all have been impacted by this, by COVID. Okay. And so this is just some risk. If you know, you might know someone, or you may be interfacing with someone, coming in contact with you're concerned about, there's some risk behaviors that may indicate someone might be considering hurting themselves or committing suicide. And some of those risk behaviors are hopelessness, and they may have a depression or a mental disorder. And it may be increased use of alcohol or substance, and have less social support, with this isolation and people not being able to get out and be with other people, has increased, isolation. And we know, particularly young people, they developmentally, they're social beings, right? They need to be in contact with others, and they like to be social. So this has been a real struggle for them as well. Okay. So if you notice, how do you recognize that someone is in trouble or needs help? So these are some things you might want to try and recognize. If the person has decreased their engagement and not talking, or not doing some of the things that they enjoy doing, even if it's something that they normally do in the home. So they've decreased their engagement, or they have lack of enjoyment in the activities. They're withdrawn from their family or friends. They're not, they're staying in their rooms all day, not talking to anyone, not engaging. That could be a sign. The sleep patterns have changed. They're sleeping less, or they're sleeping more, eating less or eating more than usual, and they appear to have less energy. Can all be an indication. And demonstrates hopelessness, crying excessively, appearing sad, becomes increased physical or verbal aggression, or lashing out. And increase, I mentioned this before, of alcohol or drug use can be an indication as well. Okay. I'm just going to check the time. As well as seemingly nervous or agitated a lot, can be an indication that someone needs help. So I apologize, I cannot see the chat. So just put up a 2 minutes or finger to let me know if someone, if I'm running over. Okay.
You have
So
about
I
1
always
minute.
believe, what was that?
1 minute.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I always believe that recovery is possible. So we just got to remember that because of these are difficult times and people are having struggles, but there is hope and their recovery is possible. And that people can and will, I believe, get better and the mental health will get better as well. But we have to ask for help, and we have to check on each other and to make sure that that we take care of ourselves, because we have to take control of our mental health.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, and this was the scoop on managing stress. So I mentioned this before, so I won't go through this again, but that's all I have. But thank you all for your attention.
Yes, thank you, Denene. I can absolutely co-sign the importance of physical activity. I walk twice a day with my dog, and I need it more than ever at this day and age. So that's fantastic information that you gave our attendees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce our second speaker this evening. Dr. Wanda Boone is the founder of Durham Together for Resilient Youth, also known as TRIBE. After eloping to Durham in 1971, Dr. Boone became the first African-American to work outside of the kitchen at McPherson Hospital. She worked at Duke University Medical Center with Dr. Charles Rowe, where she was instrumental in finding a non-invasive treatment for Reye syndrome and for a test that identified 10 pediatric metabolic disorders at one time. Moving to the corporate sector, she became the first and only Senior Executive Director of Quality Assurance and Regulatory Affairs for all divisions, national and international, for an RTP company. Wanda's prevention career spans over 30 years. She founded TRI in 2000. TRI, based in Durham, now has a presence across North Carolina, the United States, and in the coming months, internationally in Kenya. Dr. Boone is a forerunner and recognized as an expert in the field of resilience, ACEs. She believes that children thrive when the adults that surround them are well and do well. She is a guest speaker and technical advisor on prevention structures, trauma, resilience, racial inequities, social detriments of health, behavioral health disparities, and more. TRIBE connects the dots, linking the public health model, trauma-informed care, and transformative prevention. Welcome, Wanda, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. Thank you, Denene, for that excellent presentation. And we gained so much information from it. I'm going to share my screen now. So I wanted just to explain what TRI is, because we're a coalition of coalitions. And the only reason I'm explaining it is because I want you to understand that it takes us all in order to address mental health, substance use, anything else you want to talk about, COVID-19 and how we interact with the community, finding solutions. So we have a youth coalition for young people ages 7 to 17, College Coalition 18 to 24, the Good Neighbor Business Network of over 500 alcohol outlets and tobacco shops and pharmacies. We have the faith community, law enforcement, the community in general, the health sector, schools, parents, and sadly, we have a coalition of parents that have lost children due to overdose. We have a whole health ambassador program and 24 community health workers. And this is really where the work takes place in terms of connecting to the community, providing the community with information that we all need in order to be healthy, safe, and experience our best lives. So as was mentioned in my lengthy introduction, we are operational in many counties across North Carolina and the United States, and yes, soon Kenya, and we're looking forward to that. So this is where I want to begin, because when we talk about mental health, we need to think about this in the places where people live, work, and play, right? So COVID-19, even with isolation, has caused a lot of challenges that lead to stress. But what are we going to do after COVID-19? So these are the things that I wanted to mention. I want to mention adverse experiences as they occur in the individual, families, and interpersonal relationships. But then there are influences in the built community that cause stress and affect mental health. And then there are disasters that we can include COVID-19 in that also affect mental health. So in the tree, in those leaves, we can talk about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And if someone experiences 4 or more of these specific items, then they can have behavioral health or mental health challenges later on in life. Remember the number 4, and I'm going to read 10. Behavior. Oh, I'm sorry. The 10 are physical abuse, emotional abuse, and this is 4 or more before one's 18th birthday. Sexual abuse, physical neglect or emotional neglect. In the household, there's dysfunction, mental illness, mother treated violently, divorce, incarcerated relative, substance use. And I'll put my name in the chat because we can talk about this more. We don't have much time tonight. And these are the 10 things that can be outcomes from those. Lack of physical activity. And as I'm saying this, I want you to think about the behaviors of people and not think it's because of what they did or what they're doing. It's what happened to them. And this takes the stigma away from so many things that we concern ourselves with in terms of mental health and physical and behavioral mental health situations. Lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, missed work, severe obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones, which stands for violence. So when we're looking at the mental health picture, we need to go all the way back to childhood and think about what happened to an individual in their childhood that may affect their mental health. Now, so when you look at the trees and you see some other things, you see maternal depression, you see bullying, domestic violence, in addition to those things that I read. Now, let's look beneath the surface. Remember that if we're going to deal with good mental health and wellness, because the brain is not disconnected from the body. And so when we talk about mental health, we also understand that what happened to us or what's happening to us really affects our whole body. How we think, what we do, how we behave, it all affects our health. Underneath the surface in the community, I talk about built communities. So don't look at the people and think that it's those people over there that have these problems. No. First of all, it is all of us. But then if people live in a low wealth community, then it's the community and what is not accessible that's the issue rather than the people. You move the people out of that situation and some of those things go away. Historical trauma has to do with what happened to a person historically. So slavery affects DNA. The Holocaust affects DNA. What happened to Native Americans affect DNA. And so that is lodged in our bodies. It's stressful and it still causes anxiety and pain. So historical trauma, lack of social capital and mobility, substandard schools, structural racism, poor water and air quality, violence, poverty, substandard wages, lack of jobs, poor housing quality and affordability. And those of us who are working in some of these areas, hats off to you. You are heroes and sheroes because you are impacting the lives of people, their stress and their mental health, even with the things that you're working on. Denene went over some terrific facts, so I'm not going to go over those. 30% of young people in high school reported depression and feeling so sad or hopeless for 2 weeks or more that they stopped doing their usual activities. So this, so again, we're talking about what's happening during COVID, but when we're out of COVID, before we were in COVID, these were situations that we need to think of. In terms of the opioid epidemic, Denene mentioned some statistics. Thank you so much. One of the things we need to realize about Durham is that Durham is the only county in North Carolina that has more overdoses among Black people than white people. This is statewide. So we need to take a look at this at a local level, which we're doing. I was fortunate to be able to talk to over 6,000 people, literally, in a couple of years about resilience and ACEs and racism to help those people help us understand, all of us understand, what it takes to be resilient. And that is called Achieving Health Hand in Hand. Oh, the other thing that I want to mention, since we're talking about girls, women, and girls becoming women, 89% of girls that are involved in the juvenile justice system have been diagnosed with stressor and trauma-related issues. So, and we take COVID and build it on top of all of these things that I'm mentioning. And we have a serious situation, but a situation that we can deal with, which is why we have whole health ambassadors, CHWs, community health workers, who are out there on the ground in the places where they live, work, and play. They're trained, we provide the information to them, and they're the ones that go out as authentic messengers, and we're so proud of them. Lastly, I want to talk about the social determinants of health. And those are, and again, we're talking about stress, mental health, and what in the world are we going to do? Economic stability, education, health and healthcare costs, neighborhood and built community. Remember, I talked about that. And the last one is social and community access or context. And that's the one that I'm going to spend the most time on, although I could talk about all of this. Social cohesion, and this is the most important thing. Think about what it would be like if we as individuals had someone that could help us out, help us understand where the next step is in order to achieve our next greatest thing. And that's something that doesn't exist in the low wealth neighborhood. Those networks are not there for people. So we have to build them, which is why I talk about the resilient community, that we all are responsible for helping someone else out. Every child, and I will say that every adult needs at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about him or her. You have someone like that. You may not remember them, and they could be someone that's not with us anymore, but you can think of them and understand that they may have said one thing to you that you held on to for your whole life. Example, it was my grandmother. When I talk about 10 adverse childhood experiences, my number is 9. I shouldn't even be here. But it was because of the input of other people, my grandmother that spoke into my life, that I held on to her words, that I am here today. And so I want to leave you with a resilience technique. There's something that's called the community resilience model. The name doesn't fit what it is, but This, let's say between this, where my head is the resilient zone. And you want to try to make sure that you're there. If you're feeling stressed and you bounce up out of your resilient zone, then you're angry, irritable, nobody can get along with you. You don't want to be around anybody. If you bump down out of your resilient zone, then you just don't want to get out of bed. So what can you do to stay in that zone? Literally, it takes things like when you're feeling stressed, stop, look out the window, look at the trees, look at the leaves, or even better, go outside. Or you can press your hands literally against the table. And there's neuroplasticity and things that happen in the brain just by changing your focus. Thoughts, behaviors, and actions. That's resilience, and anyone can get to that place. That's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wanda. I have to say, I am completely in agreement with that. Every child needs to have at least one person that is absolutely nuts about them. I have a saying that I tell my children every day. Bless them, they hear it all the time, but I tell them regularly, your mama loves you like bark does a tree. And you are absolutely right. They're gonna leave this world knowing their mama loved them. So I hear you on that one. Thank you so much. That was fantastic information. We've actually already gotten a comment thanking both of our speakers so far for some excellent information and resources. So thank you. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce our final speaker this evening. Valerie Sauer is the Director of Education Programs at Compass Center, an agency that empowers clients to gain or maintain safety, self-sufficiency, and health through youth violence prevention, community education, self-sufficiency, and domestic violence services. She is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, my alma mater as well. So I like her already. Through community outreach, youth violence education, and direct client service, the focus of Valerie's professional career centers around violence prevention and understanding the intersectional oppressions faced by clients enduring violence. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hi, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so happy to be a part of this panel this evening. I feel like I've already learned so much, and so much of what both panelists have already spoken about really resonates a lot with the work that we do at Compass Center and with the clients that we serve. Particularly Dr. Boone talking about those adverse childhood experiences and the intersection of those ACEs with social determinants of health being really instrumental in terms of an individual's trajectory in life, and really, needing to take an intersectional approach to thinking about offering folks service and empowering them to make change in their lives. So thank you again. My name is Valerie Sauer. I am the Director of Education Programs with Compass Center. And so I really want to offer this as an opportunity to tell you all a little bit about the work that we do, inform you about the services that are available. I think that all of the information that you've already been provided is so, so important. And I can tell you a little bit about Compass Center in terms of a little bit more of the idea of boots on the ground, what services are available and what work we're doing in communities to offer self-sufficiency services and domestic violence services as well. So Compass Center is a nonprofit that's located in Orange County. We originally were developed as a merger between the Family Violence Prevention Center and the Women's Center of Chapel Hill. Both agencies had existed for decades in Orange County, and in the early 2000s really recognized the intersecting needs of the clients that they were serving. And so most folks may know us as Compass Center for Women and Families. And one of our goals in our strategic plan is to make sure that folks are aware that our services are available to people regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. And so one of the things we've been really intentional about is really rebranding ourselves simply as Compass Center to make sure that everyone knows that we're available and that we are offering services to all. So this is an image of the offices where we are typically, not during COVID-19. We have been operating since the beginning of the pandemic, just about a year ago. Of course, our 24/7 crisis line has been available 24/7, 365 days, and that's been sort of business as usual, although things have definitely shifted throughout the pandemic. In addition to that, we also operate our office line between 9 and 5 p.m. And so, before I begin telling you more about what it is that we do and the services that we offer, I really want to make sure to ground us in this idea of the empowerment model, which is core to what we do. And when we talk about the empowerment model, what we mean by that is that as service providers, it's not our role to, tell a client what they need to do or what they should do or what the next steps need to be, but instead really to empower them to trust and honor those instincts, that they know what's going to be safest for them. They're the experts on their situation. And so we're going to be there to provide them with information, talk through what the potential options are, and then support whatever it is that they end up deciding, and reassuring them that we are going to be there each and every time they may need to return to the drawing board. So our mission is to help all people navigate their way and their journey to self-sufficiency, security, safety, and health. So our services, as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit located in Orange County. And so there's some important distinctions in terms of the folks we serve. Our self-sufficiency services are available for all North Carolina residents. So our self-sufficiency services include financial education, whether that's one-on-one or workshops based around a budget or understanding and improving credit scores, planning for long-term or short-term financial goals, including buying a house or planning to send a child to college. Our career exploration and preparedness services can include working on interview skills, prepping for a resume or cover letter development. I know one of the upcoming series that we have offering virtually this coming month is talking particularly around how to land a job during COVID-19. So many of us have been affected by unemployment, and that's one of the exacerbating factors that we know for a lot of clients who are experiencing domestic violence can be an additional barrier in terms of regaining safety and self-sufficiency. So for anyone interested, we are offering that virtual opportunity to talk more about job interview skills and resume building, particularly during the pandemic. We also offer legal information services, so opportunities for clients to learn a little bit more about legal issues, predominantly related to either family law issues or landlord-tenant, although sometimes we do have attorneys and UNC law students who are available to touch on other more specific areas related to criminal law, sometimes traffic, and those sorts of things as well. And I can talk more specifically about those services if folks have questions. The next area that I can speak to is our domestic violence services. So our domestic violence services are specifically for those folks who are residing in Orange County. The reason for that being, and I'm just going to pull up my chat here so that I can see my time. But the reason for that being is because most other 100 counties in North Carolina have a domestic violence shelter that's specific to their county. So we want to make sure that folks are getting rerouted to the place that's going to be able to meet their specific needs. It's going to be closest to them. That being said, we do serve clients sometimes who maybe have come to Orange County because they're fleeing domestic violence from other areas, in which case the way that we understand residency, we're never going to be asking for, proof of residency. We're never going to be asking for any form of identification. If you're in Orange County and you're experiencing domestic violence, that's something that we can absolutely support folks around. So we have a 24/7 hotline. We offer emotional support and safety planning. We offer support around filing domestic violence protective orders. Normally in court, we are present every Thursday in Hillsborough when domestic violence civil and criminal cases are heard. We're now present virtually in court as well. And recently, one of the things that we are most proud of is that for the first time in 3 decades in Orange County, we were able to offer and open the first domestic violence crisis shelter back in October. So in the midst of a pandemic, we had immense community support, and were able to open that first crisis apartment. And actually this month, we also opened the second crisis apartment. So our approach to offering shelter to domestic violence clients is a scattered site model rather than a typical co-located model. And I can speak more to sort of the reasoning behind that, but it's been a huge lift, and a wonderful thing for our community. That shelter is available to anybody experiencing domestic violence. So that's one of those services that anybody can offer or can access as well. And then lastly, within sort of the realm which I work most closely is community education and youth empowerment. So we work directly in the schools in Chapel Hill, Carrboro, offering Start Strong, which is a middle school based program around healthy relationships, Teens Climb High, which is a 9th grade program around comprehensive sexual education, really viewing these as opportunities for violence prevention, and really empowering young people to develop these skills earlier in life. And then lastly, I offer professional and community education around domestic violence, around other intersectional forms of oppression that impact a client's experience of domestic violence, and information around our services. So as I move into this, I want to explain that Compass Center's approach to our services is really to look at a more holistic experience of a more holistic tactic of preventing violence, and serving folks experiencing violence and creating self-sufficiency. So I know that this graphic can be somewhat hard to digest, and so I can walk you through it somewhat. So what we know is that in the United States, an estimated 3 to 10 million children witness domestic violence annually. And so I think Dr. Boone talked a lot about, the impact of those adverse childhood experiences and what that can be like, particularly if that's compounded by other community aspects related to racism or capitalism or other things that might be hindering a child's resiliency, or well-being. And so in acknowledgement and understanding the large statistics around abuse that we know that children are experiencing, that's why we are present in schools, because we want to make sure that students know that there are resources. We want to empower them to recognize the differences between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive behaviors, not only within their familial or friendships, but also as they get older and start beginning those romantic and dating relationships of their own. Speaking specifically to impacts and issues related to women, although we serve folks across the gender identity spectrum, it's important to acknowledge that women disproportionately experience violence. So we know that 1 in 3 women will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime, and that the leading cause of domestic violence, or the leading cause of homelessness for women in the United States, is domestic violence. And so there's a huge link between economic justice and economic prosperity and violence and gender equity issues. And so Compass Center really seeks to address sort of the intersections of those things. And so because of that, that's one of the reasons why we pursued a grant through the Governor's Crime Commission to be able to offer grant awards to domestic violence survivors who are looking and seeking alternative housing that is safe for them. So we know that economic abuse is a huge barrier for survivors. About 98% of people experiencing domestic violence report also experiencing some form of economic abuse. And therefore, the ability to leave an abusive situation and maintain that self-sufficiency can be hugely can be great. And so one of the programs we offer, called the Micro Grant Housing Program, offers survivors small grant awards to go towards utilities, rental deposits, rent, moving costs for up to 4 months, to really support survivors in getting over that initial hump. And then we're also there sort of in the longer term beyond the crisis as well. So we are there to offer support groups, both domestic violence related and non-domestic violence related. We are there also through a program called the Mental Health Access Program to offer mental health services to clients who've experienced domestic violence as well as their children. So this graphic helps us understand sort of the more comprehensive perspective and need to address violence. And what I'll end on is this idea that violence is intersectional, that it's impossible to have a conversation about combating domestic violence without also talking about the impact of racism, without talking about the impact of capitalism and how capitalism and economics is such a determining factor for anybody, but particularly for people who've experienced violence or other forms of oppression. So to give you some concrete examples, the experience of, a person of color who's a victim is going to be distinct from someone who's white as a victim. The experience of someone of a lower socioeconomic class who has experienced domestic violence is going to be different than someone who has higher economic means and could maybe afford a hotel or a rental car as opposed to relying on shelter. And so when you start to add the layers of someone's identity into the identity of survivorships, you start to peel back the complexities and see how difficult these situations are and how important it is to make sure that folks are aware of the resources in their area. So I will wrap it up there. I think maybe I have 2 minutes if folks have questions, but I'm really grateful for your time and encourage you to reach out if you have other questions or things you'd like to follow up around.
Wow, thank you, Valerie. That was some eye-opening information that you shared there, so we appreciate you doing that. But before we wrap up tonight's session, I just want to check to see with our moderators behind the scene if we have any questions in any of the chats, either on Zoom or Facebook, where we're also streaming live, for questions.
No questions so far, a few comments. Everyone's been very grateful for this information, especially Valerie. You not only touched upon many issues that the other panelists spoke of, but also women's issues combined with equity. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
Okay.
This was all wonderful information. We did a community conversation back near the beginning of COVID, probably in the summer, which we didn't think was the beginning. And we had one of our panelists, instead of being a mental health professional, it was just someone who had during the pandemic recognized that they needed help and they were willing to come out and talk about that struggle. And that's when I took away that as really powerful. Just being able to be so vulnerable on Zoom and admitting that you need help. And I think it was interesting because everybody kind of just started saying in the chat, me too, I felt that way too. So I think that it's something that can sometimes be hard to ask questions about. We've got a couple of questions coming in now. What about the legal issues? I'm not sure which legal issues you're talking about. And another question, can you talk about violence?
So I wonder if they are referring to the legal information services that I mentioned with Compass Center. That could, let's see if Dawn responds. So what I mentioned as far as those legal information services, they are not consultations with attorneys. We unfortunately don't have attorneys that are on staff, but we do have attorneys in the community who offer their time to clients for limited consultations to help sort of understand what their legal concerns are, clarify some basic questions around what law in North Carolina says related to either family law or landlord-tenant issues and so on, and then sort of offer them information about what best next steps might be. If you're curious about learning more about our legal information services, I can share my screen again, and that way you can see the number and the website. I would recommend calling our office line, which is the 4610 number. And then since I'm already talking, I can certainly continue talking a little bit more sort of generally about violence. But then it looks like Dr. Boone, you wanted to jump in.
No, you go first.
Oh, I was just going to mention that, what we know is that in the United States, 1 in 3 women will experience intimate partner violence. For men in the United States, 1 in 4 men will experience either intimate partner violence, rape, and/or stalking. And teens, we know that regardless of gender identity, 1 in 3 teens experience dating violence. And so these issues are extremely pervasive and affecting folks all regardless of their background, their race, their socioeconomic status, their religion, and so on. And when you think about other more marginalized communities, it's important to really think about the impact of those intersecting forms of oppression. For instance, transgender women of color facing really high rates of homicide in the United States, bisexual women being experiencing the highest rates of violence within the LGBTQ community as it regards to intimate partner violence. And then I'll speak just quickly to Cheryl's question. Yes, if they have a domestic violence issue in another county, they can screen for eligibility for the shelter that Compass Center runs in Orange County. So domestic violence clients are eligible to be in a shelter in any county in North Carolina, regardless of their residency, if there's a space available. I hope that helps.
So I will say that the research shows when I spoke about adverse childhood experiences, literally there is a straight line one can draw from what happens in childhood in terms of adverse experiences all the way through any kind of violence you can speak to. So it starts with bullying, and then it goes to involvement in gangs. It goes on to domestic violence. It goes on to senior abuse. So we need to address this in early childhood so that we don't have that long line. We have a program that's called Handle with Care, which means that when a child sees a violent act, then everyone that touches the child outside of the home is alerted that this child has seen something that's traumatizing, and therefore, literally, they need to be handled with care. If they act out in school, don't consider that to be the child. Consider it to be what happened to them.
Wow. Oh, let's see. Oh, we have another question here. What advice do you have for a woman when a protective order is being violated, but they are unable to catch the offender at the home? Should she leave the home?
Cheryl, I'm really glad that you asked. I think that this is an incredibly nuanced question. It's going to depend on a lot of different factors. I would encourage this person to reach out to their local hotline. I think that Denene put the information for Durham Crisis Response Center, which is the Durham serving DV agency. And I can also repeat the number for our 24/7 crisis line in Orange County. Unfortunately, we know that, protective orders are not always necessarily the best option for a lot of clients because they're difficult to enforce. If there are other addresses for the offender that haven't been communicated or shared with the sheriff's department in the county where the defendant is, I would encourage getting in touch with the sheriff's department to also share those alternate locations, whether they're work addresses, family members' homes, so that they can try and get that defendant served. Absolutely, men experience domestic violence for sure. Like I shared earlier, we know that 1 in 4 men experience either intimate partner violence, rape, or stalking from an intimate partner. They definitely are.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you, lady. We're now out of time. Thank you so much. That does it for tonight's session on mental health. Before we leave, though, I wanted to thank all of our guest speakers tonight for joining us and providing such incredible information and resources for our attendees. You are all truly amazing women, and I want to thank you for your service to others. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who took time out of your busy schedules to join us. What an important and timely topic we discussed given the past year we've all experienced. And I hope you got as much out of this session as I did. We look forward to seeing you next week for the physical health virtual session, same time and same place. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care and be well.